Hello, Avila Advantage Macroeconomics students. We're now in week 2. Good job with the forum discussion this past week. Really enjoyed hearing their post about, or reading your post about oil and its impact on the U.S. markets. With this week, we start to look at Chapter 3 with supply and demand analysis. In fact, our forum discussion is going to be tied to that. Interesting kind of discussion going on right now about the idea of a pink tax. Do women tend to pay more for certain products than men? Is it that they're being targeted, or are these just more economic forces? So again, when we look at economics, it's a social science. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but I want you to critically think about these things. Is there just differences in elasticities of demand between men and women, that some women are willing to pay more for certain products? Or is the market being manipulative, that maybe women are being forced to pay more? Economic sense would say if the price goes up, the quantity demanded would go down, but there can be differences in demand, things that shift the demand curve or supply curve. We typically call these factors other than price, such as income, taste and preferences, can be taxes and subsidies. So some are questioning in the market right now that are women unfairly treated relative to the price of some goods and services? Are they almost like targeted to be asked to pay more? Is this kind of a form of price discrimination that exist? And some price discrimination does exist in markets. We can't go into McDonald's and say that this person pays $2 for the cheeseburger and this person pays $3, but you do see differences, especially if you're negotiating a car price, or if you're a senior citizen gets a discount. So there are different things that impact demand. And Chapter 3 gives a nice review of the factors of a market, and kind of like we call that point of equilibrium, where the price is established in the market. And it will go on to discuss things as price floors and price ceilings that may prevent it from reaching that equilibrium. So again, jump in there early in the forum discussion, read the article about the pink tax, and then I also want to share your thoughts. I want you to share your thoughts on whether there are differences in supply and demand in the labor market for women. There's been a recent trend or movement to try to encourage women to be hired or be paid at equal levels. Even the military right now is looking at putting in kind of a different amenities to try to attract and retain women, especially those that are very smart and can add a lot of value. So there are obviously cultural differences, perhaps how we who raises children, those different factors that can take play into whether someone can develop their career. But we want to look at this. We look at it again as a social science perspective and how we improve the situation. So then your second chapter of the reading this week is going to be with the kind of introduction to macroeconomics. If we think about the goals, macroeconomics is to kind of provide a stable economy, growth in GDP, low unemployment, low inflation. Now, just on this past Friday, it came out that unemployment dropped to 4.9%. But one of the disappointing news notes was that the job numbers did not increase that much. So that is a little bit of concern. But with that lower unemployment and also maybe some slight increase in the wage level, I think they said it went up maybe at 0.5% recently, which is encouraging. But the Federal Reserve may be more likely to raise interest rates this year. It's something we'll talk about later in this course. But for right now, there's still questions. Will they raise rates again in March, or are they going to kind of wait and see? Is this going to be a slow year because of concerns about oil prices and impacts to the economy? Or is there enough evidence to show that the economy is growing strong enough that it justifies another rate hike? So with that also, too, you're going to look at the frameworks of this chapter. We talk about aggregate demand, aggregate supply, some things are going to be coming, different models where it's neoclassical or Keynesian. And then also, what are the policy tools? Policy tools are what type of rules that we want to put in place to help our economy grow, to provide equality. So even with the forum discussion, does there need to be better policies out there to try to encourage more women into leadership? So some other things you're going to talk about in this chapter too is also the looking at gross domestic product, the idea that we measure it from an aggregate expenditures approach. We say aggregate expenditures equals C plus I plus G plus net exports. We call the net exports the X minus the N, the exports minus the imports. And consumption drives about 2/3 of our economy. That's just every day you and I going out and buying goods and services. And you'll read about these things in your chapter readings. But again, there are certain things that we can use either through fiscal policy or monetary policy to try to influence growth in our economy and GDP and try to stabilize these things. But later in the course, we'll look at more of these frameworks. They're also going to talk about the difference between nominal versus real. Nominal is actual dollar prices. Those change every year. It looks at how much we produce in goods and services. We measure nominal GDP. It's simply the amount of goods and services, final goods and services produced, times the prices of those things. So we know that each year prices go up, so we have to make sure we net out what is due to inflation so I can get a real value. So you look at some of the calculations of that, how they come to a real GDP, and you have to base it on a base year. They also talk about some business cycles. We traditionally have seen business cycles throughout the history of our U.S. economy. The good news is that those cycles and contractions tend to be a little bit less severe these days with a lot of the policies we have in place. By definition, a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth in GDP. So right now, we're trending upward, and that's a good thing. But as we talked about last week with the oil, could this potentially result in a recession if things go too far south, if the markets become destabilized? We hope that doesn't happen, but that's where policy comes into place to hopefully make the right decisions to prevent that. And then also, one of the shortcomings of GDP is that it doesn't really say anything about how we divide this gross domestic product up among the individuals. There are some that are very wealthy, some that are very poor. So although the United States is still the largest producer in the world, the largest economy, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily equitably distributed. So there's always social concerns about that. How do we improve those things to provide a better standard of living to everyone? Okay, well, that's it for this week. I hope everybody enjoys the Super Bowl. Again, like I will post these out here every about weekend. I record them on Friday, so but jump in there on Monday for week 2, and do let me know if you have any questions. Just send me an email. Otherwise, have a great week, and I will talk to you online. Take care.